Good evening. This meeting of the Portsmouth Zoning Board of Adjustment for January 22nd, 2025 is called to order. Just a note that due to the size of the agenda, items 3E through 3I will be heard at the second meeting, which will be held next Tuesday, the 28th. So if anybody is here for that, it will be a long wait. But we have to consider taking item 3C out of order for postponement. That is the Islington Street project. Is there a motion to take
So moved.
a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we need a vote to postpone now.
I move to postpone to, I think are they ready to come
Are they
on
ready to come
Tuesday?
The March meeting.
No, February.
Okay, so what about
Request.
February?
I move to postpone to our regularly scheduled February meeting, which is February 18th.
Okay,
Second.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Just a reminder that presenters are given 15 minutes, and if you think you're going to need more, please let us know ahead of time, and we will decide if that's something we'll do. People who are doing public comments have 5 minutes. So, as you know, our meetings are generally long, so if you could keep to those, that would be terrific. First item of business is approval of the minutes of the December 17th, 2024 meeting. Yes,
Madam Chair, I'd like to suggest a correction before making a motion of approval.
okay.
On page 2 of the minutes, which is page 5 of our package, last paragraph, second sentence, delete the phrase at the end, and would omit the other two plans. I have no idea what that means. I suspect I said it, but it doesn't seem to make any sense.
And I
Oh,
have,
yes. Go ahead, Mr. Ram.
Yeah, for doing comments and corrections, I have a correction on page 13 of the minutes. There is toward the bottom of the page a sentence that began with, he noted that the condo was created with relief from the board. That should, and the he in that sentence is me. The sentence should really read, he noted that the adjacent condo complex was created with relief from the board. That's the only item I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Murchison.
just one other correction. It's back on page 5 of our packet, page 2 of the meeting minutes. It is the third full paragraph after speaking to the petition. I'm sorry, second full paragraph. It timestamp 3058. Vice Chair Margison asked what kind of commercial uses, not what kid. So it's a typo.
So would someone like to make a motion to approve with these amendments?
I move to approve the minutes as amended.
Okay, a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Okay, the next item of business is a rehearing request. This is not a public hearing, just for all of you out there. So, what do we want to do with this?
Point of order, do we need to read it into the record?
I don't,
We can certainly read
I-
it
my-
into the record.
very long hearing.
Sorry about that.
Not the whole entire thing, just what the request is for. I don't know, it's up to you.
And by whom, I would say.
Okay, thank you. The request of Workmanstiff Properties LLC for property located at 84 Pleasant Street to rehear the granted variance from the November 19th, 2024 meeting. And this is a rehearing to specifically about item 2B, an approval of a 50-foot height for the building. And this is an adjacent property bringing the request.
So, Madam Chair, I just want to note that on page 5 of 6 of the rehearing request, that's page 24 of our packet, letter H says, references photos and sketches of which are submitted herein and hereto. We don't have those sketches, so if the board's amenable, I think that I would perhaps continue this to next week, give them a chance to submit the photos and sketches if that was an oversight. It's not a public hearing.
Not a public hearing.
So I mean, they made a reference to something that's supposed to be there. It's not there. It's not on the city website.
Mr. Ram?
I don't know if staff has any clarification on that, or,
We provided what was received, so I can't speak to that.
I also felt the lack of that, because I felt like I would have better understood the reason behind the request. I'm sorry, you can't. We're not usually quiet. Sorry. Are we on? Okay. Can you hear? Sorry. No one tells me I'm quiet. We'll do better.
I would probably give the appellant or the person filing, the entity filing the rehearing request, the opportunity to submit those. I also couldn't understand some of their concerns without the visual, even though I went to go see the property.
Any other comments about this? How do you feel about it? Would it matter if we don't feel we made an error in our rules?
Recording in progress.
Okay.
Okay. That's okay. Were you going to say something? Yes.
thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I also highlighted that there was this reference to photos and sketches which are submitted. I guess in fairness to the applicant, the appellant really in this case, I do think that having all that information, which sounds like it may have accidentally not been included somehow in the package, if there was an opportunity either to do that and hear it next week or in February, whatever works out best. I think that would be better. I mean, I read through all of it. I do think that there may be something here, but I just would like to know exactly what the applicant was trying to tell us before making a judgment one way or the other.
Any other comments?
Appellant.
Okay, so we need to vote to postpone a request for a rehearing. Would somebody like to? Yes.
Make a motion to postpone this request for a rehearing till February.
Okay. Is there a second? Date certain?
I will second insofar as with the condition that we receive the photos and sketches.
Yes,
So.
yes. This postponement is to receive the missing materials.
Yeah.
I would also suggest amending for the possibility of next week, and then if not, okay.
If we're going to postpone it, let's put it off to the next month.
Okay.
I mean, we've already split the agenda once this month. We don't need to, let's move this to next week, so on and so. No, if we're going to postpone it, it goes to the next month.
Okay, and that is February 19th. Did we get a second for this?
Second.
Yes, okay, okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So, Mr. Ram is recusing himself, and Ms. Record will be voting with us all night because Mr. Neese is not.
She's a-
Oh, my
she's in
God,
on all of
Mr.
them.
Rossi.
Yeah.
Mr. Rossi. Yeah, she's here for the whole shebang.
Yeah, but she's in on all the applications.
Yes, that's
Okay,
what I,
okay.
yeah. That's what I said. The request of 361 Hanover Steam Factory LLC owner and Hampshire Development Corporation LLC applicant for property located at 361 Hanover Street, whereas relief is needed to expand and renovate the existing commercial building and convert it to multi-family residential and to construct 3 new multi-family residential buildings, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.642 to allow residential principal uses on the ground floor of the buildings. 2, variance from section 10.5A41, figure 10.5A41, to A, allow for apartment, row house, and duplex building types where they are not permitted. B, allow a ground floor height of 10.5 feet where 12 feet is required. And 3, variance from Article 15, definition of penthouse, to allow a penthouse with a setback of all roof edges where 15 to 20 feet is required, and to allow low greater than 80% of the gross living area of the level of the floor below, where 50% is the maximum. Said property is located on Assessor Map Lot 63 and lies within the Character District 5 District and Downtown Overlay District. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Attorney John Boson on behalf of the applicant. Also with me this evening is Stephen Wilson and Shane Forsley from Hanover Steam Factory LLC. Following our last hearing where we postponed, we went through the zoning criteria, and then we received the letter December 20th. Our team then got back together, and
He make his public hearing now, right? He does his speech now, right? That's his question.
Yes, and then
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, there was a question.
no problem. We were here last, we went through the zoning criteria, and then we were postponed. We received your letter dated December 20th. Our team then got back together to answer those questions and to provide the requested elevations and materials in that letter. Since the last hearing, we also recognized that the request for penthouse relief was a lightning rod, not only for this board, but perhaps the neighborhood. So we think it's in the best interest of all the parties involved that we withdraw the request for penthouse relief at this time and really focus the relief on the elimination of the commercial uses from the ground floor. That's really the focus of where we'd like to be at this point. We've also had an opportunity to address the burial ground issue, but since the letter of January 2nd, John Shagden from our team has been in touch with Susan Sterry from the Cemetery Committee, and it's my understanding that the Cemetery Committee has researched this issue and has determined that they don't have evidence that there was a burial ground at this location. We hope that that puts the cemetery issue at rest this evening. If for some reason it doesn't, I would suggest that the presence of a cemetery is really outside the scope of the jurisdiction of the zoning board, particularly in light of really what we're asking for tonight is relief from the elimination of the commercial uses on the ground floor. I think the same can also be said of the traffic study. We did provide that at your request, but that traffic study is going to be fully vetted by the Technical Advisory Committee and by the Planning Board, but nevertheless, y'all have it. I really don't have a whole lot to add outside my letter of January 2nd. You know, we believe we've answered all your questions. We've provided all the elevations and streetscapes. And really, to simplify the request, we're removing the request for penthouse relief. Sole focus tonight is to eliminate the commercial uses on the ground floor, and also from the provision of the ordinance that requires the first floor height of the commercial uses to be 12 feet. That will no longer be necessary when we eliminate those commercial uses. Myself and my team are happy to answer any questions you have outside of the letter of January 2nd, but I think at this point, the case is submitted.
Yes, go ahead.
The other variance is land use. It's having the different apartment, row house, and duplex-style buildings.
And I believe that was requested, that was addressed last hearing as well.
All right.
And again, you know, this project, if it's approved this evening, will have to be fully vetted with full site review before the planning board and technical advisory as well.
Yes, Mr. Neese.
I guess I have one sort of general question. I'm struggling to understand a little bit what is being submitted now. We have essentially three proposals that have been brought to us: the original plan, the CUP plan, and now I think this plan, which seems to be a hybrid of the CUP plan and the original plan, basically by changing Building A back to the original plan, it appears. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Well, the original plan was simply done by illustration to show what was approved by design review. That is not the hope of the applicant to build that. Also, with respect to the CUP plan, there's some question, this was raised by Attorney Lyons last time, there's some question as to our right to be able to use Hill Street. That would put into jeopardy the multimodal way. So I think the best plan at this point in time is simply to go with what we believe is the path of least resistance, for lack of a better word, and that's to go with what you see, the hybrid plan. We still think we can build and you'll see from the streetscapes, we think it's a beautiful project. It looks an awful lot like the CUP plan, but it will not have the multimodal way, it won't have the penthouses, and it won't have the workforce housing. But nevertheless, we do think it fits into the character of the neighborhood, particularly without the commercial uses in the first floor. So, a long way to answer your question, it's the hybrid plan.
So have you formally withdrawn what we previously knew as the CUP plan from consideration by the board? That's what confuses me.
We're formally,
I don't see any records that says you're formally withdrawing that. All I see is a request to get rid of the penthouse variant.
that is correct. We are formally withdrawing the request for the penthouse variance. The CUP plan was illustrative of what we could have done with a CUP from the planning board, but that's hypothetical as well, because we don't know if we're going to get a CUP from the planning board. If we get a CUP from the planning board, I suppose we could come back to this board, but at this point in time, that is not the plan. The plan is the hybrid plan that's before this board.
So just, since this is a character district, I'd like to make sure I understand what's being proposed here. Can you tell me how many residential units are in here now? Because I had a difficult time trying to figure that out.
Yeah, it's still a 48 unit. Yep, please.
My name is Steve Wilson. I'm a co-owner of the property and the applicant. The original plan that was vested by the planning board had 42 units. 6 of them were commercial units. In this plan, there would be 42 units, and because we would be converting, first of all, we would be eliminating the commercial in building B and C, so we're able to drop the elevation of those buildings by effectively 1 story. I don't want to get into what 1 story is. It also, so those buildings are lower, and we're not going to be converting any commercial first floor to residential. We're actually eliminating those floors. That allows the project to terrace, if you will, from the taller buildings towards Town and Hill Street to the smaller buildings back in the Rock Street neighborhood. There would still be 2 units in Building D that would be converted, small 650 square foot units on the first floor would be converted from commercial to residential if you were to approve, and that's what's illustrated in your package. Building A would return to the general form of the original vested. That's the existing building. We'd be adding a story to that building, and it would have the same 24 residential units, and 2 commercial units on the first floor would be converted to residential, so that would be 26. So you'd be looking at a total of 42 units. So this is actually a reduction in the number of units, but an increase in residential units of 4 because of the conversion from commercial to residential. I hope that answers your question.
No, at the last meeting, Mr. Boson said during one of the question and answers that there were 46 residential units in the CUP proposal total, assuming you got the commercial converted to residential variance. So now you're saying there's 42 units total, is that correct? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah,
figure out
because
how many there are.
at the last hearing, we were talking about the unit count if the CUP were approved. So that would have been if the additional story had been allowed on Building A. So that's the discrepancy. 4 units would not be built. And the qualification of the site for the CUP is a big question right now. We would be having a multimodal way to property on Hill Street that we are understanding may not be public access, and we're quite sure that it's not. And it would have had to include automobiles, which would have been very problematic because it would have been a dead-end multimodal way. And we found that out at the TAC workshop.
So if I might follow up on this a little bit further, the traffic study, I believe, was completed in September, if I remember the date correctly. And in September, my understanding was the traffic study was looking at the CUP proposal, and assuming, again, you got the variance required. So the traffic study, I think, must have been assuming 46 residential units as opposed to the 42 that are in existence now.
I believe so, because we wanted to give them the maximum number of units as a delta for the study.
And my final question is, one of the things we asked for was the heights of all the stories. And I'm looking at the table on page 34 of our package, and it looks like all we got is the ground story and second story heights.
I think that's incorrect. I think there's an illustration of each building that shows the building, the level of each floor, first, second, and third, where it's appropriate.
But that information did not get carried over to the table, is what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
We submitted it, I think, so.
That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Margison.
So I want to stay with Building A. If you look at we can use any of the proposed elevations. First of all, the south elevation, is that accessed by Foundry Place?
No.
So that is accessed through that path through the project?
It's accessed through the driveway off of Hanover.
Off of Hanover, okay. So the other thing is that this is the building that you took the penthouse off of. So staying with that illustration there. So the first 2 sets of windows from the ground floor up, is that the first floor?
The ground floor, the lowest set of windows is the first floor. The second set of windows is the second floor. The third set of windows is the third floor, and then the attic.
And the attic is, in our packet, is 4th floor.
It's not considered to be a 4th floor, but it's 4th level, we'll call it that.
And there are residences in there, right?
Oh, yes. And there's 8 on each level and 2 on the first floor.
And it is not a floor because,
By the definition of the zoning, if it's under roof, you're allowed to occupy it.
okay.
I don't know
No, I know. I just wanted to hear you say it because that's something that's a little hard for us to understand. But it doesn't change the maximum height that you can have, right?
Correct.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question, and this also perhaps is for city staff. The existing and proposed building A exceeds the front maximum, I'm sorry, I should look on page 34. So starting with a facade modulation, the length, the max is 100 feet, and on the existing and proposed building A, it's 205 feet. And then going up, the front principal is, the max is 5 feet, and the existing and proposed is 99 feet. I don't know why they didn't need to get a variance for that.
believe that's an existing condition on the building.
But aren't they extending the non-conforming condition?
I don't believe so. I have to look in that, but I don't believe so. What was the other one besides facade modulation?
It's the front principal. The setback,
5 feet.
maximum setback
Is
is
the
5 feet, and for building existing and proposed, it's 99 feet.
Yeah, I mean, I can look at that, but I understand that that's an existing condition
Okay.
on the existing building.
I think that's all I have for now. Let me just,
Mr. Neese, you're up.
Sorry, I forgot one question I had. Maybe you could just point out to me, paragraph 4 of your letter says, Hanover Streetscapes showing project next to 407, Tangram is producing streetscapes that will be submitted prior to the meeting. It's unclear to me if these are in here or not. There's one that shows a Hanover Street perspective, but it doesn't really have, I'm unclear whether that's got the building at 407 Hanover in it or not.
I'm going to ask Shane Forsley to answer that. He's been handling the addenda and illustrations to the application. So excuse me.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I believe it is page
Could
10
you
of our
please-
submission.
Could you please introduce
sorry.
yourself first?
Shane Forsley, 361 Hanover Street. I believe on page 10 of the submission, you'll see the first grayscale rendering there from Hanover Street, as well as a head-on view from Pearl Street on the next sheet, and a perspective from the park or Rock Street as well. And if you're interested, we did have color renderings if you'd be interested in seeing those as well.
So which one of those shows 407 Hanover Street next to the project? I don't think any of them do. Unless you're counting the little strip next to the building on the Hanover Street perspective, which,
I believe that's 397 or 395. Is that what you're referring to?
Do you have more questions?
no, I'm just trying,
Okay.
let me check something. I may have more.
Yeah.
I'm trying, I still don't think what I'm looking for is in here, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
So go to somebody else.
I guess, are you done with your presentation? Yes.
You would go public.
Okay. And then you do all that.
You can act on the withdrawal now or later.
Okay. Maybe we'll just do it now so everyone who speaks can be sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to go to withdrawing the, to accept the withdrawal. We'll need to suspend the rules to vote on acceptance of the withdrawn variance. Then we can continue with the public meeting. I just thought it made sense for everybody to know that that is truly gone. Okay.
I'll move to suspend the rules.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Well,
Aye.
aye, yeah, that's
Sorry.
right. Sorry.
Okay. And now we have to decide if we want to accept the withdrawal of the penthouse.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the withdrawal of the penthouse variance request.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Anything else to?
Um,
You don't need to.
Yeah, I don't need to do the
Okay.
criteria.
All right.
It just seems reasonable, and everybody would prefer that, so.
Any discussion about that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. All right, now we can continue with the public hearing. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak to, for, or against this petition?
Thank you.
Good evening, Elizabeth Bratter, property owner, 159 McDonough Street. It would be nice to be able to support the two variances presented. However, it seems that the requested information from this development team by this board has not been provided, and the application is still filled with conflicting information. This board requested to be shown how the proposed buildings would look next to the existing structures and details of each building. There are no floor plans for building C, B, and D. The elevations are not shown on the elevation page. They show first floor commercial and not the residential. 349 Hanover Street, 45 and 48 Pearl Street are completely left out of the virtual views. There is not a single view from Sudbury Street. There are no views from Foundry Place, where the proposed 66-foot structure will look like when you're standing down there. How can the variances be voted on at all when the application packet still has information that does not match the design plans and the reports included? A 10.5 first floor variance is requested, yet the application states the first floors on buildings B, C, and D are 12 feet. The written application does not clarify what type of mansard roof they will be installing, which is very relevant in determining stories. A flat top mansard roof is called a short story, and it is counted as a full story. Therefore, the building would be 4 stories, which is not allowed in this zone. A hip top mansard roof is called a half story, which has to have a ceiling height of 7 feet or more, but it is not allowed to be greater than 50% of the story below where there's going to be residential in it. Building A shows a matching floor plan under the mansard roof, which is greater than 50% of the story below. The maximum number of stories allowed in this area is 3 per the zoning. What they are showing is 3.5 for those mansard roofs. The traffic report states that Rock Street, a one-way street with a mere 9 feet of driving area, will be the access way to enter and exit this development. It does not show any information on the intersection of Pearl and Islington Street, which is more likely the access point. The driveway is a mere 38 feet from Rock Street, not 60. The traffic report does not make any mention of the cars coming from Sudbury being blind to the driveway. The project will add 262 trips with a peak of 20 in the morning and 22 in the afternoon. Currently, there are 504 trips in this very tight area, 44 in the morning, 40 in the afternoon. This development will increase that area by 50% more traffic. Page 290 of the packet shows that there are 40 units proposed, yet he just told you there's 42. And the traffic report says there's 51, which is another example of how this application is filled with erroneous information. This team was asked by the planning department to come up with a more neighborhood-friendly proposal, which is being worked on, and it does seem they are moving in the right direction. It does seem odd that such an excellent development team would repeatedly not present the information the zoning board is asking for, much less present an application of this quality. Please do not deny these 2 variances. Please postpone them again and ask the team to clarify their application with the proper information needed to be able to make an educated evaluation of this development for the proposed variances that are being explored. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone to speak to, for, or against this proposal?
Good evening, Nicole Lapierre, 44 Rock Street, direct abutter. Things I would deem not clear and concerning based on HDC's latest application. Whether or not there is a penthouse, I say this because it is referenced in the application on page 52. The height is listed as 4 stories plus a penthouse. The total number of units included, the number of parking spots included, will there be removal of street spots for this development, incorrect street width measurements in the traffic study, incorrect development entrance as part of its measurements for the traffic study. The traffic study incorrectly cites Foundry Place as an access point, to name a few. The permanent and sole entrance and exit to this development should absolutely be on Foundry Place. What is currently being proposed will greatly and negatively impact the character and safety of our neighborhood with density and traffic safety issues. Our tiny, narrow streets are not CD5 zoned. This project will be irreversible. It impacts so much and so many, and yet HDC still has holes in their application. This project is dependent in part on public land, in particular the addition to the back of Building A, the original Heinemann structure. I do not think residential taxpayers who have recently received a significant increase in their tax bill deserve or would look kindly on public land being used by a developer without proper public notice and opportunity to understand and speak to it. Furthermore, when looking at the rendering titled Rock Street Perspective, the grading appears flat. Currently, there is a 2 to 4 foot retaining wall on city-owned property which abuts Building A with up to 11 feet between the wall and the building. In the rendering, everything is level and cars appear almost directly against Building A. So is the rendering wrong, or is there a plan to significantly change the grading on Rock Street and the city-owned property? Why is this not clear? I have serious concerns to changing any grading on Rock Street and city-owned property. As a direct abutter, I remain in opposition to the requested variances based on the current state of affairs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. 2, 4, or against?
Good evening, Chair Eldridge, members of the board. John Lyons. I represent Hill Hanover Group LLC that owns, as a direct abutter, owns 317, 319, 327, 329, 337, and 339 Hanover Street. When I was here at the last hearing, I talked about issues related to rights of way, etc. That's not properly before you. I've been working with my friend Mr. Bozen and Mr. Wilson. Maybe or maybe not, we won't be able to work that out. It may be an issue for the Superior Court. But I'm here tonight directly as a direct abutter. And on behalf of my client, with some conditions, we specifically object to the variance that allows for the apartment row house and the duplex. Although there's been some comments this evening about the withdrawal of the multimodal way and the right-of-way that's known as Hill Street, the application itself that's before you on page 27 specifically indicates that the property has legal frontage on Hanover Street. It has a right-of-way to use Hill Street. So there's no doubt that Hill Street is a right-of-way. If Hill Street is used for purposes of egress and egress for this project of 42 units, there's no question that that'll have a negative impact on my client's property. It's a very narrow right-of-way. Parking occurs there. It can be used as a direct access from Bridge Street. So when you look at the various conditions, substantial justice would be done by granting the variance. That's a balancing test. Certainly the impact to my client and other properties on the right-of-way known as Hill Street will be severely impacted. The variance, the values of surrounding properties will not be diminished by granting the variance. My client's properties will be absolutely negatively impacted by the number of trips that will be up and down a very narrow right-of-way with parking that's likely to occur as a result of these units that are being developed. As far as the condition that there is a special exception, conditions associated with the property that prevent the proper enjoyment of the property, again, for all of the reasons I've indicated, that we indicate that they haven't met that test. However, I would add that Attorney Bozen was kind enough to provide me with the traffic study. The traffic study itself does not indicate in it that Hill Street will be used for ingress and egress. Attorney Bozen has indicated to me that Mr. Wilson does not intend to use Hill Street for ingress and egress. So I'm here in opposition, but certainly if the board was inclined to grant the variance, we would ask that that variance be conditioned upon preventing Hill Street, a private right-of-way, from being used for ingress and egress purposes for these 42 units that are proposed. Thank you.
Okay, yes, question?
Could you please, Attorney Lyons, could you please tell us, I mean, we all generally know, but tell us exactly on the plans where Hill Street is?
Yes, if you look at, I think it's in the figure 7 in their plans. I have it on page 9 of their application, figure 7, if you have that.
I think that's from the last time,
That's from the last
Yeah.
time, likely.
so.
It's their figure 7. So if you look at the plan that you have up now, you can see Hanover Street, you can see the 3 new buildings that are proposed, and what was the multimodal way leading from Hanover Street and the front of the old factory building. If you take a right, I'll go over and point, if you take a right across the front of the building, and that's where Hill Street is located, and that runs all the way down to Bridge Street.
So follow-up question, that's a private right-of-way. How can somebody prevent people from using it?
Well, I think I think as part of your approval of any variance that you might grant would be proper to have that condition that the variance does not allow for ingress and egress for this project and the development of this project through that private right-of-way, which would be an over-intensification of a right-of-way we claim they don't own, but nevertheless.
Understood, I'm just trying to think practically how that would work.
Well,
I mean, we can make a condition, how that is actually enforced, I don't know.
Well, I think the enforcement probably would fall to my client at that point to, rely on whatever conditions you imposed if we got there. I hope that would not happen. I think you have the power to make that a condition of a granting of any variance, and then it would likely be up to my client to enforce it.
Okay, thank you.
I have 2 questions
Yes.
related to
Yes,
this
Mr.
matter.
Mattson.
So I guess the first one is, which you may not have the answer, is how does it come to be that a private right-of-way becomes so that it has like a street sign on it and is used essentially as an easement for the public to traverse across?
A mystery.
Okay.
I have no idea. I know the city has always looked at it as a private right-of-way. As part of the development of Foundry Place, the streetscape had to be divided in half to allow the development of Foundry Place. But the city recognizes it as a private right-of-way. There are deeds and plans that show it as a private right-of-way.
Okay, and so my second question is, it's a private right-of-way, but to clarify the meaning of that is, or to expound upon that is, does the public have an easement to use that private right-of-way?
Our position is no. And I think even Mr. Wilson would agree with that.
But it's being debated right now. That's
No, it's not being debated whether the public has the right-of-way. It's being debated who has the use of that right-of-way as compared to Mr. Wilson and his property, my client and their property. There's also another condominium building between those properties, and what rights do they also have in the right-of-way? And Foundry Place, also, the rear of that building abuts the right-of-way. What rights do they have? So it's really abutting properties and what rights do they have?
okay. So the right of way, it's a private right of way that specifically applies to the property owners on that parcel and the abutters.
Developed through either adverse possession, rights through deeds, shown on plans as properties are being developed.
Okay.
Jeff had another question.
That's it. yeah.
That's two, okay, go ahead.
So, but there's another right-of-way that a building will go on. Wasn't that, I thought you said at the last hearing that there was another right-of-way that one of the proposed buildings would be built over.
So my clients claim that the Hill Street right-of-way runs down onto and through the parking lot where this development is being proposed.
That's what I thought.
And that's one of the other issues. If that is correct, how will my clients, can we work something out so that that right-of-way will continue and these buildings can still be developed and built? But for purposes of tonight, I don't know if that's really in your purview. For purposes of tonight, I'm simply here as a butter indicating that we think we know our property values will be impacted, my client's property value will be impacted if Hill Street is allowed to be used as a point of ingress and egress.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Anyone else to speak to for, yes.
Hi, my name is Susan Sterry, and I am co-chair of the Portsmouth Historic Cemetery Committee. I'm only speaking now because my name came up in the presentation, and I just want to clarify to be on the record that yes, well, first of all, I was contacted by an abutter and asked questions if I knew about the cemetery down there because it's historic. I had a brief discussion with her, and then I went and did some extensive research on the area, not just the corner of Rock and Hanover. I went all the way back to the deeds of 1600 when John Mason was granted the property from England at that point in time. I can give you a lot of history, but it's not relevant. What I do want to clarify is that, yes, I could not find on any grants or any deeds back to the 1800 that marked that there had been a cemetery anywhere in that area, not just on the corner of Rock and Hanover. And that also it's not reliable for any online information unless you can find the documents that prove that your relative is buried someplace. And the other point is books that don't have citations with them aren't reliable, and you can't use those. Now I'm coming from a genealogy aspect. You can't use those as proof of anything. So at our cemetery committee meeting, when Mr. Shagnon was there and Sean, I stated that I couldn't prove that there had been a cemetery anywhere in that area, but I can't prove that there wasn't. And the reason I can't prove that it wasn't, back in those days, people were commonly buried in people's backyards and things like that, and not marked anywhere on a calendar. So I forwarded information saying that there are 2 RSAs that apply to this situation, and one is 289, where you can't build within 25 feet of any known cemetery. And the second one is 227, which is a construction RSA, so that anybody that is doing construction, if they come across remains or headstones, or they think there are remains, they're required to make notification of it. So that's all I could prove, and that's the information that I passed on. So I just wanted to clarify the record for the public that
Thank you.
that was.
Thank you, we appreciate it. Thank you. Anyone to speak to, for, or against?
Thank you.
Pass.
Good evening. I'm Marcy Vaughn. I'm a direct abutter, 407 Hanover. I apologize for the late submission of this letter. My husband and I had been waiting for the streetscape of the row house as compared to our home at 407 Hanover. That was not submitted. It hadn't been submitted as of 8:45 last night when I was finally writing this letter. And that's really important to me because the way this building overshadows my 225-year home will absolutely impact my property values, my air, light, and privacy. The row house is located directly across from my kitchen window. And I will have the pleasure of looking at that row house every day for the rest of my life. Now, I want to be really clear that I'm in favor of development of this property. Not only that, I would be delighted if Mr. Wilson were the person to develop this property because I've seen the buildings he makes and he could make some pretty good buildings. But this plan that we have before us is incomplete. As some of my neighbors mentioned speaking today, they listed some of those inaccuracies, errors, and material omissions. Two of my other neighbors submitted detailed letters, and I would encourage you to look at those letters, Robin Huslidge and the Waldwicks, detailing numerous errors, omissions, and material inaccuracies, internal contradictions. That's important. And I've heard people here tonight questioning, okay, which plan are we talking about? What specifically is at issue here? Let's remember why that's important. It's important because Portsmouth ordinances at 10.235 make very clear that when this board grants a variance based on plans and representations made at a public hearing, the representations concerning the features of the proposed buildings, structures, parking area, or uses which are the subject to regulations shall be deemed conditions upon which the variance is granted. So what that means is this. If we have a plan that is rife with inaccuracies, material omissions, internal inconsistencies, that means that no condition binds the developer. So they essentially have carte blanche to build whatever they want to build as long as it somehow fits in to these conflicting pieces of information that they provided. I want some certainty. I want to know to the greatest extent possible what this is going to look like. And moreover, you know, I don't know anything about land use. I don't know anything about development, but I know these guys do. And this plan is a C-. They can do an A. They can give us a plan that will give us some predictability, some understanding of how our properties will be impacted. I don't know how my property value will be impacted. I know I want a building there, and I know I want that building to reflect and be compatible with the character of my neighborhood. It's not. I would direct your attention back to one of the images that you looked at a moment ago. That's the Rock Street perspective. And one of my neighbors recently just pointed out that that is wrong. So I don't know. Does this mean that the developer intends to, change the grade of these properties? It's simply not flat at all. And why is that important to me? That's important to me because I live in a 225-year-old colonial right across the street, and the grade of that property impacts the perspective of that building on my home, on my kitchen window. So I'd just like to know what we're looking at. And I'm not convinced that this board actually has authority to grant a variance based on a plan that is so filled with inaccuracies, material omissions, and inconsistencies. The second issue I want to talk about, and it's been mentioned by several people already, is again, being consistent or at least compatible with the character of our neighborhood. Now, this is a diverse neighborhood, right? So where I live, which is on the corner of Rock and Hanover, directly facing what would be the row house. Can't tell how big that row house is going to be compared to my house because that's not been submitted. There's nothing like a row house in that area. There is a row house 5-4 blocks down, but my house is situated within a cluster of 5 colonials, all built in the late 1700s. Those colonials will be overshadowed, we don't know to what extent, but they will be overshadowed by whatever is built there. But as I start to look at these buildings as depicted here, it's not simply that they will be overshadowed, either a lot or less than a lot. It's that this building looks nothing like a 1700 colonial. These properties that we live in are very distinctive, and it's very historic as well. To have 5 1700s colonials clustered right there by this development causes me to wonder, what is the meaning of character in character districts? This is a character district. Who enforces that? Who actually maintains some sort of semblance of paying attention to the character of a neighborhood? So, I know that this board gets a lot of information, and you have a really, really tough job, and I appreciate the attention that you pay to all of these submissions. But again, I really want to emphasize that if variances are granted based on these plans, that is just signing up for conditions that are amorphous or non-existent, and it gives the developer the ability to do whatever they want. I want them to do something, but I want that work to be A+ work, not C- work. So I hope the developer will continue to work with our neighborhood, and I hope that this board will stand with us and encourage the developer to continue to do that, to continue to develop something that is compatible with our neighborhood. So I thank you again for your time, for your service to the city, and for your thoughtfulness on this development.
Thank you. 2 for or against?
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'll be brief. There are a lot of questions tonight, a lot of concerns about issues really unrelated to the request for zoning relief tonight. Questions about grading, questions about roof styles or whether the houses fit in the neighborhood, questions about traffic. Those questions are properly before, or should be properly before the planning board, not the zoning board. Interestingly, tonight, there was not one single comment about the relief that we're seeking tonight. We're seeking relief from the requirement to put commercial units on the ground floor. That's it. Everything else is going to be dealt with at full site review before the planning board, the technical advisory committee. We're only seeking relief from the commercial uses from the ground floor. From the plan, it's been vetted and approved, design review approved by the planning board. I think there's plenty of opportunity to address every single one of the abutters' concerns before the planning board and before the technical advisory committee. But I think it's really telling that not one person stood up here tonight and raised a concern about the relief that we're seeking tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
My plan to wash it.
Elizabeth Bratter, property owner, 159 McDonough Street. I'd just like to address a couple things. Number one, you can't really address the variances until you can really see what the project is. And as stated by zoning board members, it's questionable as to what the project is. It's hard to say how many stories there are, how many things are going to be put in here, where is it going to sit, where is the door going to be, where is this going to be. So in terms of the two variances they're asking for, which is no commercial on the first floor, and what was the other one? Anyway, I just went a blank, but they were...
Street height.
But the reason nobody wants to talk about them is because we want to know exactly what they're planning. And their plan is not accurate in any way. It's got 3 plans put together in one with erroneous information. And the other thing that you should be aware of is that the planning board did not address the second CUP plan. It was never brought, it was brought up, but it was never, it was just in a work session. It was not voted on, it was not agreed upon. So that is also erroneous information. So I apologize that we have not spoken to the variance, but nobody is comfortable speaking to either of these variances until the document, which is supposed to be legally accurate, is made legally accurate. We want to support this project, but we want to know exactly what they're going to get. Thank you.
Thank you. 2 for, against?
Let me be a little more specific. I do have some comments about the relief requested. The question for me is, what is going to impact my property value more? Will it be commercial on the first floor? Maybe. Maybe not, though. My property value might be more impacted by the massing and the scale of the structure that will be facing my building. Is that building going to be graded down to street level, or is it going to be 11 feet higher? I don't know, and I would like to know. So the question for me is indeed, do I support this residential variance? And I do not have enough information to make that decision. I hope I can support it. I would like to support it. I have faith in this team. I think that they are capable of an A+ job. This is not an A+ job. We need some consistency, we need predictability, and we need a clear plan that provides transparency that allows me to make that assessment. So if they want me to assess whether I support a residential variance, I need a plan that gives me that information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicole up here, 44 Rock Street again. I wholeheartedly echo their sentiments. I would also like to bring to your attention, there's some people on Zoom. If you could kindly allow their commentary. Thank you.
We know that, thank you. Okay, there is a hand up on Zoom.
Robin Husledge.
Good evening. My name is Robin Husledge, and I live at 27 Rock Street, around the corner from this proposed development. Referring to my letter previously submitted for your consideration, I would like to point out numerous errors and conflicting information as brought to your attention by my neighbors contained within this submission. In the developer's submission, it states that access to the project site will be provided by way of Rock Street, which is where I live, and Foundry Place, and by way of a new driveway that will intersect the south side of Hanover Street approximately 60 feet east of Rock Street. Firstly, in the submission, access is not provided by Foundry Place, which is a much more commercial-sized street. We would love for them to access this property from Foundry Place. Additionally, the location of the new driveway has moved since the traffic study was completed, which greatly impacts the congestion and traffic issues at the intersection of Hanover and Rock, and Sudbury feeds into there as well. Also, there are further inaccuracies within the traffic study, such as the width of Rock Street, which the report states it's 28 feet wide, and it's actually 17 feet 7 inches, because I went out there and measured it before the snowstorm. And there's no mention of Pearl Street, which is a two-way street that it used to, the old entrance to this property was right opposite Pearl Street. So that's, so I would throw out that traffic study because it clearly makes some assumptions that are wrong, that totally discounts their results. Mansard roofs, 2 of the buildings, half of the buildings on this property have mansard roofs. None of the houses surrounding the property have mansard roofs. The roofs are throughout our neighborhood are gable roofs, which are predominantly gable, salt box and flat roofs. There are no mansard roofs. Mansard roofs are out of character with our neighborhood, and this is in Character District 5, which should match with the existing character of our neighborhood, which the proposed mansard roofs do not. Row House, Building B, which is 82 feet long, facing Rock Street. It's huge. There's no modulation proposed. Row houses, first of all, are not permitted in CD5, but if you allow this row house, then please require that there is significant modulation between the 4 units, so it doesn't appear to be one single massive building. I do, however, with all of that said, applaud the developer for limiting the heights of buildings B and C to 36 feet, whereas they could have gone up to 40. And the current application is considerably better than the as-of-right original application, which the planning board approved for one huge building instead of 3 along Hanover Street, with a tunnel entering from Hanover Street to access the development, compared to the now, 3 separate buildings. This proposal is definitely heading in the right direction. I want to support the developer. The neighborhood really wants to make this work. They just haven't gone far enough yet on reducing the height of building D and the other changes in terms of like the entrance coming into the development. It would severely impact our property values, our life in terms of traffic on our small little historic neighborhood streets. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. Last call. Anyone else to speak to, for, or against?
Can I ask a question?
You may.
So I just want to ask another question of Attorney Bozen, if I could. So why isn't there's currently on the back of the Heinemann building, there is Foundry Place, which I know has parking in the back. Why not orient the building so that the traffic does come off of Foundry Place?
I'd ask Jillian to put up the site plan.
And would you please
which
reintroduce
shows
yourself?
the buildings. My name is Steve Wilson.
Thank you.
361 Hanover. The short answer to your question is that we don't own the land between Foundry and our building. We are not, a lot of information has gone out in the last couple of minutes. A lot of it is just not true. So we are not building any of this building on city property. The city owns the area around the back of our building, and I think it's well depicted on the site plan that the planning board is looking at. It's a no-build area, and under the control of the city. We are discussing with the city the ability to license the aesthetic condition of it and modify it to be green space, but we have no place from Foundry that we could access our property. Even if we did own that area, there's a gradient difference back there of about 8 or more feet, which and a retaining wall, so you'd never be able to put a driveway up there that would meet any minimum standard for sloping, et cetera. It would be, 10 or 12% would be a very steep grade. You'd have one that would be 30 or 40%. I don't know exactly, but I can tell you we don't own it. We have no intention of owning it, and it's not available to us to own. and you can't build on it, as far as I know. I feel like tonight, you're being asked to deny a variance that is very specific. I feel like it allows us to lower building B and C and break the buildings up. I think you've heard from other people, there's letters in your packet, and I think people spoke last time about the conflicting nature of commercial uses on the lower level here, and the negative impact that would have on parking in the neighborhood, et cetera. And we're certainly not done working with the abutters and the city, but I can't develop a plan for this board that would fully illustrate all of the idiosyncrasies of the neighborhood in anticipation of hoping to get this commercial first floor variance. I think having commercial there would be a bad idea. It'd bring constant traffic from people who don't live there. It would compete with the residents in the area for parking on the street. And that's why we're here, to improve the plan. We intend to continue to improve the plan. We heard the attorney discussing the status of Hill Street. At the time, 3 months ago, when we printed this packet, it was indicated by information that was a public right-of-way, but our plan in front of the planning board shows a barricade of the traffic from our project to that area, and I completely understand why they wouldn't want to have the traffic go down Hill Street, and the claim of a right-of-way through our property by his client. We've gone back 300 years. There's no research, and it doesn't preclude him from filing a lawsuit, but I can't predict what will happen in the future. Those to say, well, these buildings aren't the right height or the roofs aren't right, would mean that the planning board completely missed elevations, footprints, setbacks, et cetera. That would be unlikely. And these buildings are all lower than the plan that we submitted and was vested by the planning board. So I'll submit that we've been working with the neighbors and the city. We're going to continue to work with them to get the best project we can there. And I completely disagree with the interpretation presented to you regarding this conflicting information, et cetera. Even the sloping on that street, the street slopes, my site is completely flat, and I think if you study the plan, you'll see that the cars would appear to be parked downslope from each other. So if I wanted to pay for completely engineered elevation of the building, this does depict the buildings, and it does show where the entrances are. And these elevations, I think, and the request of it was more related to our penthouse relief, which was elevation related, and had nothing to do with the request to eliminate the commercial space. If I have to,
I'm just going to, you've answered my question.
Thank you.
I am just going to say that Hill Street is an open issue. I recognize that. I recognize that this board has no purview over that. But I will say respectfully, I believe that all that stuff should have been worked out before you even made an initial application to the city. I don't understand why that wasn't done. So that's just something I wanted to say.
I'm sure I may hear that from the planning board as well, but as far as our research shows, we don't have the right to drive across his client's property. Hill Street doesn't start until beyond their property, and we have no intention of putting our traffic down Hill Street. That's why the study precludes that, but they'll be evaluating that study.
All right, thank you. Do you have, is your question for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you stating that the ZBA preferred plan, which
No, the planning board.
we're looking at, was approved by the planning board?
No, I didn't say that.
You just said the planning board has seen all of this.
No, I actually said on the plan that the vested plan that the planning board had.
You didn't say
seen.
vested plan. You said the planning board
know
had
what?
seen this, but oh well, we'll
It's a
chalk
matter
it
of
up to.
I have a question for Attorney Boson. You keep saying that the only thing we're here to talk about tonight is the 10.5 feet where 12 is required. But we're also talking about row house and duplex buildings which are not permitted. We're talking about everything but the penthouse, right?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to double check that that is the situation.
Mm-hmm.
2 for or against? Please make it quick.
Okay.
I don't usually take a third bite at the apple, but I do want to just quickly respond to something that Mr. Wilson said. I'm not asking this board to deny these variances tonight. What I'm asking for is information about what that row house will look like. I'm asking for Attorney Boson to produce the streetscape that was promised in item 4 on his January 2nd, 2025 letter. That hasn't been produced. I cannot give a reasoned response to this request for a variance without that information. I am not asking this board to deny it, though. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Public hearing's closed.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'll start with some comments. I think, I appreciate the neighbors' comments and concerns. I think that a lot of what has been discussed it was related kind of to the approach and presentation and style of the applicant, and there's some legitimacy to that for sure. But basically, I guess what I've been gathering is that so first of all, that I have faith in our staff, so that these are in fact the only 2 variance criteria needed. So no variance needed for heights or the number of units. And then, the problem about Hill Street, if that's something to be dealt with, that's not really our purview. That would be more for the courts. And then, so this site is going to get developed one way or another. They can build plenty of things there, and we've seen an example without variances. And all of those would be, from the municipal standpoint, those would be better than a surface parking lot. I guess my 2 main things are, for one, if we're just focusing on the variances being asked for here, it's whether they can have residential on the first floor instead of commercial. And in my opinion, that's favorable to the neighborhood. I would think that they would want residential rather than commercial. And then the other thing is that you can have, the 12-foot, reducing a 12-foot first floor to 10.5 feet. I also would think that the neighborhood would be in favor of that. So it's kind of interesting scenario here where the variances being asked for are actually advantageous. And then additionally, again, I would could think that apartments, row houses, and duplex are more desirable than a big box building. So if we're just looking at what's being asked for here, to me it seems like a win-win to allow these things. I know there's discrepancies in the plans submitted that are uncertain, but it doesn't actually apply to the variances. It would be great if it was all consistent and a perfect application with all the information we could imagine, but for these 2 variances being requested, I feel that I have enough information, and my preference is to allow something like this that would benefit the neighborhood as opposed to something less desirable.
Anybody else?
And that's because I really commend withdrawing the penthouse, because I had reservations about that.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Marchison.
So I think, again, just comments, because I think it's good if we just discuss this, but I think it is an initial matter. I think what concerns me about this whole application is that I recognize that, and I was the one who said it at the last hearing, that the legal issues surrounding this application are outside of our purview. However, I wish there were more of a gatekeeping function, that when an application does come before the city, that there's some sort of checklist that says if there's any outstanding legal issues, those things really do need, I think, need to be resolved before staff time and board time is taken up on it. I think it's possible that with this, if we do approve this tonight, this project still probably will not be built. I know that Attorney Lyons said that regardless of whether the right-of-way would be impacted, whether or not this building was a right-of-way, was the as of right building or as of this variance, as of the preferred building requiring the variances. So I'll get off my soapbox there for a bit. But I think that if you look at, I appreciate the way that Mr. Mattson is looking at it, because if you look at it very narrowly as to the variance requests that we are being considered, I do believe that we have enough information here to make that determination tonight. I think perhaps some of the confusion is that this was submitted with the penthouse. The penthouse has been withdrawn, and since less relief is being asked for, there's no problems with the submissions as they are. I think the fundamental problem with this property is the zoning itself. It's CD5. It's not at all in keeping or in character with the neighborhood. That is the fundamental problem. I do think that this is probably an improvement on it, based on what could be there. I think that some of the concerns that I have for the layout, I mean, with all due respect to Attorney Bozen, the traffic study and traffic impact is more properly before the TAC. However, health, safety, and welfare and essential character of the area are two of our criteria. But going back to the health, safety, and welfare, I think and I understand that the city owns some of the land in the back, but the more natural way to access this property is through Foundry Place, not off Hanover Street, sort of weaving in between those buildings to get to the driveway, to go down to the parking garage. That's a problem that I have with it. The other problem I have is we have gotten testimony from the attorney for the abutters that the requesting of this variances will absolutely reduce the value of their properties. I think we can perhaps cure that with saying that Hill Street shall absolutely not be used as an egress. But I mean, I'm just sort of throwing things around to see what others think. So I think my thoughts are a little bit perhaps not clear, but also I think it reflects that this is a tough project, but I think fundamentally it starts with the wrong zoning in this area.
Yes. Mr. Mann.
Well, I agree with the comments that have been said, and if we're looking on the narrow request residential, yes, we do have enough information. But we don't approve variances based upon that narrow request. We approve variances application as presented, which in my mind means if there's any discrepancies or contradictions in that application, the applicant can choose which one he wants. If one part of the application says 3 stories, 40 foot, and another part of the application says 4 stories, 48 foot, and we're only looking at something that has nothing to do with that, but it's in the application, he's going to put up 48 feet. Why? We approved it. We approved the variance, but we approved the application as presented. And as the abutters pointed out, there's quite a few inconsistencies, contradictions, whatever. Granted, they've been working on this for a while. They've already gone to the planning board. They've already come here. We sent them back requesting a traffic study that was done 5 months ago. So I am not comfortable, and we already know it's going to affect the applicants in that the abutters in that neighborhood. I am not comfortable approving any application, especially coming from an attorney and a project team that have been working on it for months that have that many inconsistency contradictions. I have no problem with a homeowner sketching out something, and we've seen these applications, and that's fine. But if you're going through professionals, that's better be right. I've been a financial analyst for 35 years. I don't deliver reconciliations that are out of balance and say, well, oh well. No. That's what a professional does. He makes sure the work is correct.
Anybody else? I too am having difficulties with this application. I don't think it should take such a long time to review this and review this to figure out how many units are proposed. And I am concerned that 407 Hanover Street was not included in this. It would have been important to me to get some scale from a streetscape view. And I would have liked to see the rear of Building A. And even though what you're asking for are fairly small variances, the knee bone's connected to the ankle bone, and they can't exist alone without all of the other things that I am still having concerns about, because I don't feel like I quite understand it yet. And even though we don't have design review, it is a character district, for better or worse. And therefore, I think it's very important that we would see how this fits into its neighborhood. And I am very concerned at the size of the buildings, the length of the unbroken face of the buildings. So, yeah, I don't see how I can approve those variances because it's this then that. They don't stand alone. Anybody else? Yes.
Can I ask a process question?
Sure.
If the applicant withdraws,
He can't, we've already had a
what?
public hearing.
Oh, okay, fine. Forget it.
Yeah, we've already gone through the withdrawal. So we need to act upon the remaining variances.
Yeah, so I appreciate the other board members' thoughts, and I do totally agree that these criteria don't stand entirely by themselves. They're part of the project. I guess my thinking is that what they can build without asking for these variance criteria are all the same concerns you guys have, but then it would also just be one big boxy building instead of something that, compared to that, fits in better with the neighborhood. And also it is abutting the parking garage, so if you consider the whole neighborhood, it's a transition area, so.
And I see the wisdom, but it's very hard to make a decision based on it could be worse. And I don't think that's really what I'm supposed to consider.
Yeah, I'm at the point where
Well, have we heard, I don't know if Mr. Nees and Jody want to say something.
Did you want to say something? No.
Sure.
Okay, please.
I wasn't going to,
No, I'm
because I don't want
sorry,
to
I thought it
repeat,
was indicated.
I don't want to repeat what other people said. I think there's a lot to like in this project. There have been a number of changes that have been made as it's been developed that I think have, in my mind, without regard to whether they apply to the variances requested or not, have improved the project considerably over time. To some extent, I think that's working against the project, because you may remember I asked Attorney Boson, were they actually withdrawing the CUP proposal? Because prior to tonight, they didn't actually say they were doing that. And so I think we've got this problem where we've got all this information that's presented to us, and we don't have a concise package of what is being actually proposed now, with number of units and what the streetscape looks like with 407 Hanover and a couple other things. That makes me a little uncomfortable, because, you know, some of these variances, I think, that are requested make a lot of sense, but I don't understand exactly how it all fits together. Contrary to what was said during the public hearing, some of the people did raise concerns directly related to the variances being requested. They expressed concern about the row house, for example, which is not a permitted, which needs a variance in order to be constructed. And they asked some questions specifically to the variance, which may or may not have been answered. I guess it depends on your opinion on some of that. So I struggle a little bit. I'm not at the place where I want to deny everything here, because I don't want to kill this development as it's going forward. It has definitely improved over time.
I guess I would just add is something for us to consider is Fisher v. Dover as well. So I really don't want to keep comparing it to this could be worse concept. It was just, yeah.
But I'm with Mr. Neese in that if I gave these, I am not convinced that I know what I would be approving. And I understand that this is very complex. But it shouldn't have so many moving parts, I guess. It has buildings and it has a lot of units, but I feel like it still has moving parts, and that makes me uncomfortable. But I don't want to get you in the middle of Fisher v. Dover, and I am, can we postpone again?
I'll cut to the chase, because you just mentioned what I didn't want to happen.
Well, I don't
But at the same time, as Ms. Neese said, the project has improved. It's going in the right direction. Even the butters think it's going in the right direction, but still has a long way to go. So, that being said, I want to make a motion to deny the request, and I'll speak to it if I get a second.
I'm sorry, can I just ask for clarification on the motion?
Yes.
I thought you were going in the opposite direction. So in order to keep the project going, can I just ask what your thinking is about to move to deny?
Well, if we approve it as is, they're not going to make any more improvements on it. They'll take what they get and run to TAC and whatever. I don't think it, and they haven't spoken about it tonight, they haven't met the 5 criteria. Because I was going to deny it based upon 10.233.24. Granting the variances would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. And clearly from the people who have been coming here tonight, the abutters, they say it will affect the surrounding properties. And if the denial triggers Fisher v. Dover, they have to make changes to the project to bring it back, and hopefully those changes would be more positive and address the abutters' concerns. I think it's the only way we get changes.
For me, oh, sorry, this is still a discussion, there's no motion.
So, does that answer your question?
There's not a second to it yet.
Yes.
For me, I feel like invoking Fisher v. Dover would be counterproductive, because it would have to be such a major in general, it would have to be such a large change, such a difference, that the project would basically have to,
It could just be the one with no variances.
which is, yes, it could be,
Yeah.
which doesn't come back to us at all, yes.
I think,
But we approve it, there'll be no changes.
Well, there's other boards to go before, and I imagine they would have some input.
Maybe.
my concern is if that we deny it, then we are going to run up against that Fisher v. Dover problem. I think it's possible that if we approve it, I mean, I think your concern is they won't make any more changes, but then we've kind of stopped them being able to make a development that is perhaps more in keeping with the surrounding area. So,
Which would only happen if they make some serious changes.
Or they just go back to the I don't need any variances. Which we have been shown sort of as a cautionary tale. And
I remember Oldport and how many designs that went through.
there's no saying they would. There's no
Understood.
saying that. So,
Also, one minor point I would add is there is a row house, I think it's on Sudbury, but it's definitely parallel to Islington and not that far away from this parcel. It's not abutting, but I would consider that the neighborhood.
No, I'm just talking about,
Oh yeah, it wasn't addressed
The
towards
whole-
you, it was just a thought
just
of,
immense. What do
so
we
I
do?
guess I withdraw my motion because I didn't get a second.
All right.
Do you
As
wanna
it
say
is
something?
now, we feel like we still did not get the information we asked for. Is it possible to postpone again, to give them a chance to give us the information so that we can feel confident about what we're voting on and so that we can get a streetscape and perhaps a better view from Foundry? Is that something that we can do?
or if we could just ask them to submit a variance application that stands on its own, does not reference any of the previous submissions, just a sort of, I mean, I know it's the same criteria, so it's not we wouldn't have to publish or anything like that, but I think that just a clear, clean variance submission that deals with the 3 buildings and the variances for which they need relief from, the zoning ordinances they need relief from.
I feel like that's what a postponement would allow them to do. Are we agreeing? Okay.
Yeah.
You'd have to be very specific about what you're asking them.
Right. I think we can do that.
We did last time, yeah.
We did last time, which is one of the reasons we're doing this again. Would someone like to make a motion to that effect?
I would move that we continue this application to the February 18th meeting.
19th.
No, it's 18th. We meet on
It's
Tuesdays.
19th because that's a holiday.
Oh, another holiday?
President's Day.
Oh, okay. So I move that we continue this application until the regularly scheduled February 19th meeting. And if I get a second, perhaps we can go through the criteria that we would like for.
I'll second.
Okay. So I would like to see a standalone variance application that just so it's presented and advertised, that just has the information needed to support the variance requests for the row house, the 3 buildings, and the difference in floor height, and also offers streetscapes, the renderings, and offers streetscapes from the area around the immediate surrounding area. So I think we have Hanover, but Hanover, Rock, Pearl, and I would actually like to see something from the Hill Street side. I don't know if that covers everybody's concerns about what they would need to make the decision.
And, yes, and certainly a definitive number of units.
Units. We just want a clear number of units. And I will say, in making this motion, this is an extraordinary, you're not going to do it. So this is an extraordinary move on the part of the ZBA. We normally do not allow people not only a second bite of the apple, but a third bite of the apple. And it's something that I'm not super comfortable doing, but I also think that denying this and denying the opportunity to have this application go forward in a way that's more sensitive to its surroundings would be lost, actually. So I don't know, does the criteria that for the resubmission of the application?
I've got renderings and streetscapes from Hanover, Rock, Pearl, and Middle?
And Hill.
Hill. Mr. Neese has his hand raised.
And define the number of units.
I think in many cases, we have the information, but it'd be nice if it was in one package, so we don't have to hunt for it. So some of the things that would be useful that have been brought up in earlier things was the number of parking spaces. Granted, the number of residential units is lower, so I don't expect parking is an issue, and TAC will look at that. But it would be nice to know, since that is a concern of the residents.
I guess I would just add, I think the main thing is to make sure it's error-free as opposed to a lot of new information, just one consistent design without conflicting information.
A clean submission.
This is actually coming out of left field a little, but one or more of the letters suggested that there was an issue with the streets being narrow for emergency vehicles, and I guess I'd want that reassured that that is not the case, and I imagine they have been going through in the past, but.
That is something that TAC will definitely look at,
Yes,
though, yeah.
you are right, thank you.
TAC will do that.
You are right. A second.
What was the second?
Did we get a second?
Yeah, Tom?
Oh, you did
yes.
second, okay.
Thank you, Tom.
All right. Is everybody comfortable that they know what is in this motion? Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay, then a yes vote invites the applicant to return on February 8th to, oh my God, did I just not know that? 19th, with the information that we think we're lacking, very specific information, and to pick very specifically this one project with no things left over from the past. Okay. So a yes vote postpones. Ms. Record?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
No.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Okay. Mr., Jeff?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So you are invited, should you accept, to come see us in February. Thank you.
Can we take a
Thank you. Yes, 5-minute break, please. I think we Okay. The zoning board of adjustment for January 23rd is back in session. Okay, good, got that. And the next item of business is new business A, the request of 111 Front Street LLC owner for property located at 65 Griffin Road, whereas relief is needed for after-the-fact construction of a front porch and rear deck, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.5212A, allow a 21.5-foot, I'm missing the front yard setback where 30 feet is required. B, allow a 6.5-foot left side yard setback where 10 feet is required. C, allow a 29-foot rear yard setback where 30 feet is required. And 2, variance from section 10.321 to allow a building or structure to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 258, Lot 31, and lies within the Single Residence B District. Is there anyone to speak to this?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, Derek Durbin. I'm here on behalf of 111 Front Street LLC, the owner of the property. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Griffin Park, which has a number of medical professional offices. This property, if you've been down to Griffin Park, is the last residential property right before the commercial complex. It's only actually abutted on, I believe it on one side by residential property, possibly two, but it's abutted to the west by Griffin Park, and then to the north across the street, Griffin Road, by land owned by the city of Portsmouth that has a water pumping station on it. So it is uniquely situated in that sense. As the chair noted, what is before you tonight is an after-the-fact application for a front porch and a rear deck that were built within the setbacks. Obviously, never an ideal situation to have to appear before the zoning board after the fact asking for relief, but I can assure you this was not a let's build this now and ask for forgiveness later. As you'll see in the submission provided to you, my client did apply for and receive the building permits for both structures. Unfortunately, they were issued under the mistaken belief by both the applicant, my client, and the city that a fence that a fence running along the left side of the property was believed to mark the easterly boundary and extend out to a old boundary marker, rebar, situated near the pavement of Griffin Road. Setbacks were calculated or measured based on that understanding, which was also confirmed by the abutting property owner next door to the left side, who was also under the belief that that fence and the line ran where it was shown on the applicant's plans. Those plans were also based on a recorded lot line adjustment plan from 1977. Unfortunately, again, it turned out, it was later discovered, that the land was never actually formally conveyed, which, as some of you may know, you can have a recorded lot line adjustment plan, but that doesn't mean that your lot lines are actually adjusted, as opposed to like a subdivision plan that gets recorded. The lot line adjustment plan, you need to have some type of deed conveyance, and in this case, that never happened. Unfortunately, it is what it is. After learning of the issue, my client did have a survey of the property done that was completed in October. They were aware that there's a very good chance that the front porch encroached into the front yard setback. It did turn out, after the survey was done, it showed that the front porch did encroach into the front yard setback. However, to their surprise, they also discovered that a very small corner of the deck constructed to the rear of the property also encroached into the rear yard setback by just over a half a foot. As you can see from the plan, the house, and it doesn't show all the features that existed prior, but what you can see even from this depiction is that the front of the house encroached into the left and front yard setbacks prior to construction of the porch. In addition, there was a rear entryway and some stairs on the rear left side of the house that encroached into the left yard setback. I don't believe they encroached into the rear yard setback, but those were removed as part of the renovation of the house. You know, in retrospect, I know my client's regretful of the decision to have moved forward with construction without having an updated survey of the property performed, but the mistake was an honest one. It was certainly not one done in bad faith, and they're here before you tonight seeking relief to rectify those setback encroachments that now exist. Turning to the variance criteria, unless there are questions, granting the variance will not be contrary to the public interest and will observe the spirit of the ordinance. The rear deck falls in line with the existing house. It's also angled away from the house, the closest house on the abutting property to the east. The setback encroachment only pertains to one corner of that deck. As I had mentioned, it's just over a half a foot into the setback. As you'll see on the applicant's survey, there is an existing garage that is almost entirely situated within the rear yard setback that pre-existed my client purchasing the property is lawfully non-conforming. And as I had mentioned, there was, although it's not shown on the plan, a non-conforming entryway feature and stairs to the rear of the house, just back from where that bulkhead appears on the plan that my client removed, and that obviously was a non-conforming aspect of the house that existed. While the front porch does technically encroach into the front yard setback, it is more than 30 feet from the pavement of the street itself. A large portion of the Griffin Road, what is assumed to be the Griffin Road right-of-way, is assimilated into the front yard of my client's property, so the front porch is set back quite a bit from the street, kind of in line with where others have their front porches at the fronts of their houses on the residential side of that street. It's also located a considerable distance away from the nearest structure. I think it would be hard to argue that either the front porch or the deck would have any negative impact upon the light, air, and space of any of the surrounding properties. I would argue that these features actually enhance the appearance of the property, which benefits the surrounding properties, if anything. So for these reasons, granting the variances would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood and would certainly not threaten public health, safety, or welfare. Substantial justice will be done by granting the variances. As this board knows, the court has determined that any loss to the individual that's not outweighed by gain to the public is an injustice. Here, I can't think of any gain that the public would realize by denying the variances. The home was an eyesore in its prior condition. The features that were added to it and the renovations that were made to it do improve its appearance and did add elements of functionality to it that didn't previously exist. The rear deck adds, it's another way into the house that maybe previously didn't exist, where you had a different feature of the house that encroached in the left yard setback where access was gained. So in some sense, it's trading one for the other. I would obviously point out that requiring removal or denying the variances would require removal of these features, and that would constitute a rather significant financial hardship on my client. So for these reasons, the balancing test weighs in favor of the applicant. Values of surrounding properties will not be diminished by granting the variances. As I pointed out, I do believe that these features improve the appearance of the property. If anything, they should enhance surrounding property values, not diminish them. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. The property does have several conditions that distinguish it from surrounding properties. For one, is shown on the surveyed plan, and as I mentioned, a large area of the Griffin Road right-of-way, or what is assumed to be the right-of-way, is assimilated into my client's front yard. The front porch is situated more than 30 feet back from the edge of pavement, and while that area can't be utilized when determining compliance with the ordinance, the structure itself certainly observes or preserves the light, air, and space of the abutting properties in that sense, and does not negatively impact those properties. Another unique condition of the property relates to the treatment of the fence as the common boundary with 49 Griffin Road. Again, there was a common belief that the boundary followed this old lot line adjustment plan. So I think that is a unique condition because it is the understanding that the owners of 65 Griffin Road and 49 Griffin Road have always had since that lot line adjustment plan was recorded. Finally, the property was already non-conforming with respect to the front, left, and rear yard setbacks prior to construction of these features. While these are technically expansions of those nonconformities, the nonconformities did exist and I would argue are reasonable, non-intrusive to neighboring properties. So when considering these special conditions, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general purposes of the ordinance provisions here, the setback provisions, and their application to the features at issue. And finally, the proposed use is reasonable. Property will continue to be used for the purposes it always has been historically used for, single-family residential in a single-family residential zone. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions the board has.
Mr. Neese?
Thank you. I just have one.
Yes.
I think you might have touched on it a little bit in the special conditions discussion. I understand how the lot line, or where the lot line really is, affected the setback on the right side of the, left side of the property, sorry, as you're looking at it.
Yeah.
But the porch also that was built with a building permit from the city expanded the nonconformity into the front yard setback. Why wasn't a variance requested at that time for the porch, since it was expanding into the front yard setback?
There was a belief that the property boundary was, let me get my directions right, further north, so in other words, closer to the edge of pavement, due to the fact that there was an old property boundary marker. It was rebar and a pin situated directly north of another pin close to the edge of the fence. So the line was drawn directly straight out from the end of the fence to the to that old boundary marker, which was apparently not a valid boundary marker.
So there was a confusion on where the front property line was, as well as the side property line.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Questions? Yes. Mr. Rand?
Thank you. Yeah, my first question actually is for staff. The table on
Yes, I saw that.
page 292 of our packet shows it as a right yard encroachment, but we're all in agreement that this is in fact the left yard.
Sorry,
Yeah.
that was an error in the table.
Okay.
Yeah, I checked the legal notice too, and thankfully it was right, because I had a moment of panic when I saw that earlier, and I said, oh no, if the legal notice went out and it's wrong, I've got a problem. I was like, and I looked back at my narrative and said, oh, thank God I identified it properly there.
Yeah. It's always a question mark. Is it based off of where the house, direction the house is in, or looking at the house from the front? Anyway, so I guess I'm following up on Mr. Neese's question. So there is no indication that there's another pin on page 309 of our packet.
That's correct.
Which is the surveyor's results. The surveyor did not mark that, but you're saying that your applicant in good faith believed that there was a pin further out and was basing the front property line based off of that.
Yes, their contractor identified rebar and a pin out from rebar and or a pin. I'm not sure exactly if it was both or just one, but it was described to me as rebar and a pin out from the marker that you probably see. I believe it's an iron pin. I don't have the plan directly in front of me, and I can't read it from there, but it's an iron pin I believe you're referring to, probably that runs kind of parallel to the fence. Is that? And
well, I mean, if you're looking at the actual survey, I mean, it would be pretty clear. There's a couple of pins. Looks like that.
Yeah.
That there's the one that was the old boundary. Looks like there's one that was perhaps marked for the intended new boundary
Yes.
that never got deeded over. So I'm just trying to understand what your applicant found, because certainly, as Mr. Neese pointed out, pretty legitimate reason for the side yard setback seems a lot less legitimate for the front yard setback, which goes up to 8 feet of front setback that the new porch is encroaching into.
That's mostly correct. There was a front yard setback encroachment. There was a front entryway to the house that was torn off. I don't know if that's shown in any of the photographs, but there was one that pre-existed that was torn off. Obviously, it's not a farmer's porch. This is a larger feature than what existed. Those stairs extended to about the edge of the, because they're still there, if anybody went out to the property, they extend almost to the edge of the decking for the front porch, and then of course you have stairs that extend slightly further into the front yard setback. What was found at the property, and I walked it with the contractor, is that there was some sort of boundary marker out from that pin that you're referring to, close to the edge of pavement. I have to assume that Adam Fogg didn't mark it on the plan because it was a boundary survey based on his shooting of the boundaries, but I guess it's a good question. I don't know the answer to be honest, but I do know that there was something out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll go off that. Then I guess one of my questions is, so the left side yard, so how was this discovered? Basically, they were making, they did all this, and then suddenly there was a realization. What was I know you say discovered that no deed was ever recorded on page 297 of our packet.
Yeah, so it was a subsequent meeting with the inspections department when an additional change to the home was being considered. It was discovered that, wait a minute, we kind of both erred, I think, was my understanding of the conversation. The inspections department, also thought that recorded lot line adjustment plan was the boundary, and that the boundaries were accurately depicted. The applicant also believed that, but it was obviously realized that there was no deed and that there needed to be a deed conveyance for that to have actually established any type of different boundary than probably what was shown on the GIS, which I think was relatively accurate in the end. I mean, it shows the structure's a little bit askew, but it was closer to that than the lot line adjustment plan. So it was realized when they were considering an additional change, and then at that point, again, there was no threat of enforcement action or anything like that. It was just, okay, we got to get a survey done, figure out, what the encroachment. Well, it was assumed it was just the front porch at that point. Realized that corner of the deck also encroached, and now we need to rectify it. So it was something I'm not sure anybody might have picked up on had it not been for that subsequent meeting to discuss the other change that they were thinking about. Yeah.
So it would not solve all of your client's problems, but it would at least solve the side yard setback. So why not just convey the property now as per the original plan and complete that deed and conveyance?
I think we don't know if the neighbor would even consider that. We know they don't object to what was done on the property. It could certainly be considered if the variance were denied, but I think everybody's considered. I think it's kind of like a don't upset the apple cart type of situation. Everybody's considered the fence to be the sort of the boundary, and it's been maintained by up to the fence has been maintained by the owners of 65 Griffin Road, same way as the front out to the edge of pavement has been maintained, even though it's city land, or we assume it's city land. It's not identified really as anything. It's like it almost appears as a remnant parcel in the front, but we assume it's part of the right-of-way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, waiting for the chair. Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm going to kind of still go back to this right-of-way. If you look at page 305 of our packet, it shows a stamp for the Rockingham County Registry of Deeds from September 23rd, 1977.
Yes.
So it was recorded.
Yes, yes. What was not done, unfortunately, and I've seen this, and I've actually dealt with it for at least one municipality that I represent, is that particularly back in the 70s and 80s, even early 90s, is that planning boards would approve lot line adjustment plans, and there was never a condition placed upon them for the recording of a deed if land was being conveyed. And owners of the properties adjusting their boundaries often believed that property was conveyed upon the recording of the plan. And I think some municipal officials probably believe the same. What I think a lot of people know now is that, you actually need to have a deed conveyance to convey the land, unlike a subdivision of property, which once you have a recorded plan, the property is subdivided, and then you only need deeds out when the parcels are conveyed. Here you need to do it pretty much at the same time as recording the plan for it to be effective.
So to that end, so if you look at the staff memo, it says that it was relied upon a site plan that was provided for a lot line adjustment plan recorded in 1977, which, I just said. But I'm just a little confused because this house, I look back, this house was just purchased last year.
Yes.
So title work was done at that point. And if you look at the deed into the current owners, there's no mention of the... I know what you're saying. The deed there was no deed recording the lot line adjustment, but there is no mention of it anywhere in the deed into the current owners.
Yeah, I think how that transpired is that the contractor that worked on the property did a review of the municipal files, which is where when it went to planning and zoning, which is where or perhaps also in inspections, is where the lot line adjustment plan was located.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think they weren't operating off of title research, or if you review the deed describes a different boundary. I looked at it.
Yes, yeah, it does.
Yeah. But if you were to go in the municipal files, it's not, you're looking at the lot line adjustment plan. And I think that's where people got turned around when looking at this from the very beginning. I mean, yes, would I as a lawyer go in and review the whole title history? Yes, I would. But I'm not sure everybody without that background would necessarily do so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. I would just point out, though, putting all this aside and obviously looking at the encroachment as if it were brand new, not coming to you after the fact, I would submit that I do believe it's a reasonable request for an expansion of that front yard nonconformity, just given how far setback it is and what it's surrounded by. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to answer.
You're free to...
Okay, I'm free to go. Okay.
I think we finished the title
Yes,
search
we did.
101 for the audience. so.
Okay, is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay. Public hearing's closed. Ms. Janice.
I'm ready to make a motion unless you want to have a
Well,
discussion
please
first.
do.
I'd like to make a motion to grant the variance for the application as presented and advertised.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Oh, there-
Okay, never mind.
we can discuss I'm sorry, did you have your, okay. All right. Go ahead.
Let me preference my discussion by this is clearly, an accident. I think it's clear, an accident meaning this, there was, as was pointed out, there was no intent to try and violate the zoning ordinance. It's unfortunate that this lot line revision is not recorded. And so, working through the criteria, I think is pretty straightforward. Because of the location of this lot, this is a relatively minor variance request. There's no effect on light and air and will not affect the health or safety of the public. It's consistent with the spirit of the ordinance. Setback requirements are designed to protect light and air. This will have no effect on that, given the location of the lot. There's no link between strict enforcement of this. In this instance, there would be no benefit to the public to suddenly deny this variance and force this applicant to remove his porch that's already been established. And in fact, it would cause him unnecessary expense with no benefit to the public at all. There's no evidence that this will have any impact on the values of surrounding properties. No one has testified to that. None of the abutters have complained, so I don't think there's any evidence that that's a concern. There are a number of special conditions to this lot. Number one, it's situated in a place where it's adjacent to commercial properties on one side, and on the other side, it's city-owned land. It does have houses on two sides to the east and the south, but these are not close, and the non-conforming structure has no impact on those. The current property is sited on one side of it, a little bit askew perhaps. The relief requested is relatively minor. On the one corner of the lot, it's just a couple of feet. In the front, it's a little farther than that, but it's facing a road, and it's well off the right-of-way of Griffin Road. For these reasons, I think there's no fair and substantial relationship between the strict enforcement of the ordinance and this property that is justified.
Does the second have anything to add?
No, I do not.
I think we have some discussion.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I was going to second this, but quick draw man will get there first. But I was hoping that the maker of the motion and the second might consider a stipulation, which is that the left side yard setback will be measured against the original property boundary prior to the 1977 proposed revision. And my point there is that I wouldn't want this to be, should the lot line be adjusted and the conveyance be done, I wouldn't want this to be used in the future as some type of justification for building something even closer to that property line.
Good point. Do you accept that?
Could you restate it? I'm not sure I followed it.
So the left side yard setback relief is measured relative to the original property line prior to the 1977 record of an alternate property line.
Yes, I would accept that stipulation.
And does the second? Okay. Any further discussion?
I mean, I would just say I do support this. I think that, and these kinds of cases we're always kind of concerned about somebody coming back after the fact. But had this come to us beforehand, I think, as Ms. Janice has pointed out, it's something that the board would accept. The front porch is relatively, it's an open structure. There's lots of open space around this particular property and the home that's situated on it. So I do think that it would have, be something that would easily have allowed. That the back porch discrepancy is likely a construction error, especially without a survey being done, which typically we don't require a survey necessarily for many, home improvements. It seems like it's pretty far away from the property lines. So with that, I would recommend approval as well.
With that, we will take a vote. Ms. Record?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Ms. Margerson?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You may keep your deck and your porch.
Thank you.
And get that deed recorded.
Yes, and get that deed recorded.
And talk to your title search. Insurance.
Okay, the next item of business is new business B. The request of Northeast NE Marine and Industrial, Inc., owner for property located at 200 Spalding Turnpike. Whereas relief is needed to install a freestanding sign 2 feet from the front property line, which requires the following. 1. Variance from section 10.1241 for a 30-square-foot freestanding sign where freestanding signs are not allowed. Said property is located on Assessor Map 237, Lot 56, and lies within the Gateway Corridor and the Single Residence District. Is there someone to speak to this?
Good evening, Chair Eldridge. Nice to see you. Monica Kaiser from Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley, and Roberts, here to present this application on behalf of Attorney Phoenix and Johnson. With me is Shannon McNally in the back. She is a trustee of the property where New England Marine and Industrial sits. If you look at your staff memo, you can get a pretty good sense of the overview through the aerial map and the zoning map regarding this property. I think we've all had the occasion where, particularly if you might be traveling in an area not familiar to you, you're looking for a business location or an office location, you can see it, but then there's that moment where you have to try to figure out, okay, I see it over there, what way am I supposed to get, how am I supposed to get to where that is? And that is why we're here this evening. This property is sort of interesting in that it has frontage on Spalding, it has some frontage on Echo or Woodlawn Circle or whatever on the one side, it has frontage on Farm, and then it has some frontage on a paper street, but the only access from the right-of-way into the property is from this driveway on Farm Lane. And you can see it probably best from one of the aerials. You can look at the staff memo to see it there. You sort of turn in between what's now the chimney sweep and one of the car dealerships. And there's a big long driveway that's actually, this property is sort of bisected by the zoning. So, you know, maybe in an ideal world, you would have an entire property in one zone. And, but here we have the G1 gateway zone just taking up sort of the front strip of this property along the Spalding. And the rest of the property is in SRB. And that's where the driveway is. So one way in which the property owner wants to remedy this situation is to construct a sign and put it at their driveway or just before their driveway entrance on Farm Lane. And there's an image of the sign in your packet at, let's see, the plan itself is at meeting packet page 322. And then a visual of the sign is at meeting packet page 324 and 325. So this is just going to be a standard freestanding sign, 2 posts, you know, a graphic with the name of the business, and then sort of there's a name for what I guess I would call it like a marquee where you can replace the letters below. It's total 30 square foot sign. We're here because signs are not permitted in the single residence district at all. Placement of the sign is shown on the plan at meeting packet page 321. It's also shown at meeting packet page 341. The idea is to place the sign close enough to the road for the driver to see it and be able to react and make the appropriate turn. My client tells me, as does Attorney Phoenix, that a lot of times what happens is a client tells me that some GPSs don't track to 200 Spalding. They have to tell people their address is 90 Farm Lane. Other times they have clients reach out to them from the respective auto dealerships. I'm here, how do I get to you? So in any event, that's why we're here. I'm happy to answer technical questions or questions about existing and proposed conditions. I don't want to belabor this at this hour. There are a number of photos in the packet of the entrance from the Spalding into Farm Lane, and you'll see that there are other commercial properties and some signage in that immediate area. If there are no questions, to just quickly go through the criteria, we would submit that the variance is not contrary to the public interest. The spirit of the ordinance is observed. Looking at the test and determining whether or not there would be an unduly and marked conflict with the ordinance to such a degree that it violates the ordinance's basic zoning objectives. So we would submit to you that that is not the case here, where what is proposed is this sign. Again, it's not going to alter the essential character of the locality. It's located far enough away from the houses in the residential district, and it's really at this transition point. Substantial justice would be done, benefit to the public from denying this sign, but that there would be some hardship to the applicant if the sign were denied, as well as hardship to customers of the applicant and the residents on Farm Lane, who are often getting overflow traffic from people trying to find out where to go. So for all those reasons, I would say substantial justice is done by granting the variance. It's not going to diminish the surrounding property values because of the modest size of it, where it's placed, the distance from any residences, etc. Denial would result in an unnecessary hardship, three-part test, special conditions. We have this property bisected by zoning. It's got all kinds of frontage, but only one point of actual access to the right-of-way. It's got public utility easements, etc. And it's in this transition-oriented zone. I would submit to you that that combines to create special conditions. No fair and substantial relationship exists. We look at sign prohibitions in certain areas are meant to maintain consistency. Use regulations are the purpose is to maintain sort of grouping related uses together. We've got a number of commercial uses right there on that strip along the Spalding. This sign is frankly not that far away from that and still in an area of some commercial activity. Proposed use is reasonable. Again, given its signs, the intent, there's nothing particularly outrageous about it. It's not lit. I would submit to you that it's reasonable as proposed. And for all those reasons, I would say denial is an unnecessary hardship, and we've met the 5 criteria. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there questions?
Just a quick question. The sign won't be illuminated, correct?
It will not.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So question, I guess, and I don't doubt that there's confusion amongst the customers of your client's business. Has there been any consideration to trying to petition to get the address changed to a Farm Lane address? I would think the fire department certainly would be on board from a 911 standpoint.
I wouldn't be able to speak to that. I can ask Shannon. Do you know if you've made any efforts?
No, that's never been brought to our attention before as an option.
Okay. I know that Google, I just Googled 200 Spalding Lane, and I was able to see where you were, but maybe people who have other GPS providers have some difficulty.
I'm sorry, we can't. Yeah, if you're going to, if you would like to speak, you need to come up. No, don't apologize. It's just so.
Can you just come up here? And I did want to ask you, Shannon, can you just confirm, are there any lights intended
Please come to the mic and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Shannon McNally. I'm the trustee of the property.
Okay.
Yeah, there will no, yeah, we have no intention of using lights.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Now you're official. Okay, thank you.
So we can
Do
certainly.
you have another question for her?
I do.
Okay.
Oh, Shannon?
Well, so, and I fully believe that the sign you're proposing is very modestly sized, and I think that's fine. I'm just curious with the nature of your business, and at least it's not a changeable sign. We've seen a lot of people want to put in the little LED signs below and, change them all the time. So very traditional, stick in the letters, but I guess based off the nature of the business, why do you feel that you need to have that capability to have the, admittedly small but 4-line sign that can be changed out with different letters?
Well, mainly because we have a lot of, well, first of all, most of the public there doesn't know that we're open to the public. They consider us like almost a wholesale business, and have for years, so a lot of people don't even think they can stop. So that was kind of where that was coming from. And also, like, if we had a sale, something of that nature that we wanted to broadcast to people, that was also the other reason for that type of sign. But mainly, it was just for people to find it. We get calls all the time. I can't find your place. I've been around the Portsmouth traffic circle multiple times. They end up at the Ford dealership, which they're great. I mean, the other guys, other business in the area are awesome. I mean, they direct them right to our place. But it's just, it's just been an ongoing thing for years. And finally, I said, you know what? We just gotta, and we can't put a sign on the Spalding because it's a New Hampshire state road. So I was like, I just want to try, because everyone's like, oh, so you're got a great store when we can finally get to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure this will fully solve your problem, but I understand it's a step toward making that. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone in opposition? Anyone to, for, or against? Okay. The public hearing is closed. What would you like to do?
Madam Chair, I'd move to approve the requested variance as presented and advertised.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. You have your second from Ms. Record.
Okay, thank you. So as indicated, I mean, I do think that I'm not entirely sure this will solve all the applicant's problems, but I also think it's a relatively reasonable request based off of kind of some of the unique situations that the applicant is finding themselves in with regards to the fact that their business, which is in one zone on this very oddly two-zone divided property. You don't see those very, very often. Really, that's what's driving the fact that a variance is needed here. If it was all in the G1 zone, that would not be an issue. The applicant's total requested amount of square footage of signage that they currently have, combined with what they're proposing here, is still far less than what the G1 district would say is the maximum allowed. Basically, they would be looking at 174 square feet, where 300 would be allowed if this were, in fact, in the G1. So I know certainly the neighboring neighborhood is very protective of the SRB portion of this particular property, but it's really for something far more significant in terms of development, rather than simply a pretty small sign overall. So just trying to hit up the criteria. We have that granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. So again, what's the sign ordinances, and granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. The sign ordinance is trying to prevent us from having visual clutter, trying to primarily protect single-family residence neighborhoods from signage. Really, businesses by and large are highly restricted in a single residence B area, so it's not surprising that the sign ordinance would say, hey, signs really aren't part of that. We don't expect them to be there. I do think this is, meeting that. It's really outside of where the actual neighborhood is. It is positioned on the opposite side of the driveway, closer to where vehicles will be accessing the property from the more traveled highway rather than through the neighborhood, so wouldn't necessarily promote, movement through the neighborhood. So it is respectful to what we're really trying to accomplish by preventing signs from being in an SRB neighborhood. And again, is really in compliance with the overall spirit of the ordinance for a G1 district. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. Again, there's really nothing here that the public would have for some kind of stake in this that would say that that the applicants need to better direct traffic to their business. and help explain what their business is, would outweigh that. So that's our balancing test. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, very modest sign. Yes, in a district where it's not allowed, but again, far away from the established neighborhood, so that it really wouldn't be impactful to where it would change the nature of the values of those properties. And then special conditions, as the applicant has indicated, they are on a very, very large lot. Their business is located in an appropriate G1 district, which is about 1/3 of this very large lot. But the remaining 2/3 is in SRB. That is where their driveway happens to operate through. They do have the situation where their address is not actually the road that their driveway is on. Perhaps something that could be remedied in the future, but for the moment, seems like a part of the problem that they're experiencing. And basically, what they're requesting for is overall reasonable compared to what they could potentially have been asking for if it was Zone G1. They are still well below the total amount of signage there. It's a pretty small sign, not changeable in any way. And with that, I think that recommend approval.
Does the second have anything to add?
No.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, then we will take a vote. Ms. Record?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Ms. Marderson?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. I hope people find you. Me too. Okay, the next item of business is the request of Custom House LLC owner for property located at 40 Pleasant Street. Whereas relief is needed to install a projecting sign which requires the following. 1. Variance from section 10.125.1.20 for a 20-square-foot projecting sign where 12 feet is the maximum allowed. Said property is located on Assessor Map 107, Lot 81, and lies within the Character District 5, Historic and Downtown Overlay Districts. Is there anyone to speak to this? Anyone? Welcome. No.
Good evening, board. Thank you for your time. Dan Harmer, 40 Pleasant Street. I'm here representing Howling Wolf Taqueria. We took over the previous Book and Bar location, and in partnership with Portsmouth Sign, we thought it would be best just in the ease of building the sign, taking the same dimensions, using the same existing brackets, just swapping over the hardware from those signs. I know there's a couple other of those same existing brackets along that building on Pleasant Street as well. It was then brought to our attention that the sign that had been previously there for about 5 or 6 years was non-conforming, so potentially a little bit of ignorance on our end, but we're hoping that we might be able to make something happen here. I'm no expert when it comes to the ordinances or the historical district. I do appreciate all the architecture in downtown and how beautiful the city is, and very informative to be here tonight throughout some of these conversations.
Best example.
But attached, there is a document that Portsmouth Sign did provide to help us try to articulate some of the issues that have arisen and how we can hopefully come to resolve this. If you'd like, I can run through the points with you right now. The variance will not be contrary to the public interest. The new sign, the Howling Wolf, does not alter the characteristics of the neighborhood. The sign is an exact replica of the previous sign that was in place for several years and will not affect the public health, safety, or welfare. The spirit of the ordinance will be observed. The spirit of the ordinance is intended to maintain the aesthetic and functional integrity of the signage within the city. The new sign maintains this intent. It mirrors the exact size of the design of the previous sign, and the installation will not negatively impact the quality or safety of the surrounding area. Substantial justice will be done, allowing this new sign to be installed. in the same size and location as the previous sign will ensure that no injustice is done to the property owner and/or the business. The values of the surrounding properties will not be diminished. The proposed sign is consistent with the previous sign that has been in place for several years. It has not caused any reduction in the value of the surrounding properties, and we do not foresee any negative impacts. And then lastly, literal enforcement of the provisions in the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. Basically, any further delay, we'll have to have a new sign made, and we're just really hoping to, we're pretty much ready to have the sign hung and hoping that you might grant us this. And thank you.
Are there questions?
I'm sorry. The Book and Bar sign was non-conforming.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Do you have something?
There's
Okay. You can start with that. Okay. Of the public hearing, so is there anyone to speak to, for, or against? And we do have someone online.
Eric Holstein?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yes, how are you doing? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I apologize for not being there. I had some childcare issues. I'm the owner of Howling Wolf. So I really thank you, Dan, for coming up and talking. I just wanted to give a little more context behind it. So when we took it over, the first thing we did was find out who installed the signs in the first way, which was Portsmouth Sign. To everyone's knowledge, it was the current Book and Bar sign was an approved sign. To the fact that the last owner said, of course, I got permits when I put it up. No one can find any records for this. Plus, Portsmouth Sign, I don't know their full history, but I believe they're very reputable. They typically wouldn't put up a sign without it being approved. So when we went through the initial process, both with them, their suggestion was if we change the hardware, it'd be a much bigger deal because then we'd have to make sure that then meets all the historical stuff. There are some lights there that were already in place before we got there. We would have to kind of re-engineer those and change those. So the easiest way to do this to keep things status quo as possible was simply to remake the sign as is, where it just hangs directly onto those brackets. So I'm really hoping that that's what we can continue to do, because there'll definitely be a few more steps. And the last thing I want to do is have to deal with brackets in this. I mean, the building is beautiful. I would love not to change those things or alter those things and just literally just be able to spit the sign. We did go through one trial where we tried to just paint the Book and Bar sign, which means we wouldn't have to go through this process. Because it would just be refacing, but unfortunately, as we started to do that sign, which is, we are guessing it's 5 years old. We believe it's actually much older, but I was looking with the planning board at Google Images, which were 5 years old, and it's starting to fall apart. So we couldn't actually just paint it and just move on that way. So that's basically where we are now. I'm really hoping you consider our application.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? To, for, or against? Public hearing is closed. What would you like to do? Anybody?
I'll make a motion to approve the application as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so going through the criteria, I'll take the first two together. The variance is not contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. This proposed use doesn't conflict with the purpose of the ordinance. It's a business with a sign advertising that business with the exact same dimensions as the previous business that was there, and even an attempt of the same sign. And signage is allowed to advertise your business, and it wouldn't, altering the writing and logo on this sign doesn't really alter the essential character of the neighborhood, which is that of many businesses. It doesn't threaten the public health, safety, or welfare, otherwise injure public rights. It's above anybody's height and out of the way, and safely secured to the wall. Substantial justice is done. The benefit to the applicant should not be outweighed by harm to the general public or to other individuals. There's no reason to think that this change in the words and logo on the sign would harm the general public, and there would clearly be a benefit to the applicant to approve this sign. The values of surrounding properties are not diminished. There's been no testimony that that's the case, and there's no reason to think that that would be the case because it's a similar use as what was there and what is in the surrounding area. And finally, the literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. Unnecessary hardship means because of the special conditions of the property that distinguish it from others in the area. There is no fair and substantial relationship between the general purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. Again, the intent here is not to have overly large sign that imposes on the public or is distracting to drivers. And in this situation here, this property already had a sign in this exact location in the same size. And to everyone's knowledge, it wasn't in violation until discovering that at present day it was. This sign will be consistent with what's intended, and then finally the proposed use is a reasonable one. Again, it's just replacing the sign that's already there in the same size and dimensions, so it is certainly a reasonable use.
Does the second have anything to add?
I mean, the motion is fine. I would just say that this is, obviously a priceless building in downtown Portsmouth, so probably the better to leave, not impact, the less we impact it, the better. So, but I have nothing to add to the motion itself.
Right. Any discussion? Okay. Then we will vote. Ms. Record?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
No.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You are approved. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
I gotta change it. 6 to 1.
No. Is there any new business? Or a motion to adjourn? Yes, go ahead.
Just to follow up on our meeting last September,
Yes. Coming.
is there any new information on when we'll see that?
Hopefully next month.
Thank you.
Sorry, just.
New Year's resolution.
You just met on that today.
Can I just clarify? So our next meeting is next week on Tuesday,
Yes.
but the motion for rehearing for the other Pleasant Street building and
Is
also.
March.
Both were for
February.
February.
Oh,
You
and
forget
that's-
March is a month.
I know. And that's the meeting I'm chairing because you're not going to be.
Right.
Thank you.
And, yes, I know, but there was no intent.
Oh, yeah, no. I think she was like February.
Motion to
February.
adjourn.
Second. Oh, I had to make.
Is there a motion
Yeah,
to
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,